This is real. Xal'atath's real form. Old gods locked her away. We're getting some new information here in 11.1.7. Could it be related to some Xal'atath lore and what her true form is? Why she was ever in the dagger? How'd she end up there? How'd she know N'Zoth? All these weird unanswered questions could be answered in the next patch. Let's see what our boy Doran has to say about this lore.
The new patch is right now on the PTR, and there is so much
It's a
new
very
lore
loud
to
Doran.
unpack. We got a literal quest where we see the old gods unite together to banish Xal'atath. We see her form. She leads a void army against them, but apparently she can't do anything against their empowered forms. Yasharaj, as the leader, says that she's only now going to watch as this world gains power without her. We also see her real form. We learn that apparently she was not a void being to begin with. Then we get an ethereal quest.
If this is what Xal'atath looks like for real, I mean, I feel like I got played. Because she is a real turn-on right now, and then this is what... She's a big boy. We could be getting some interesting feelings about how we've been looking at Xal'atath
to begin
all
with.
these
Then
years.
we get an ethereal questline where we learn that a part of the ethereal leaders betray their own and embrace Demencius. So what is even going on? Is Xal'atath really a void being? Let's break this down because the new lore is absolutely insane. While having the best deals on the market for all games and software, Gamivo just added mobile top-ups for your favorite mobile games with the best prices that you can get.
You guys
with
have
my Gamivo
phones,
link
right?
in the description below. Best of all, if you use my code DORON, your discount will be even bigger. So make sure to use my link in the description and the code and check out Gamivo. So the absolutely craziest questline came out recently, which I gotta say is the most lore-heavy questline in years, because this is the first time we had ever seen Yasharaj in real time, and the old gods collaborating, as usually this lore was only in like legends or text or chronicle, but now we are seeing it for the first
this
time
looks cool.
in the game, like we're playing through it. Also, a lot of the theories I talked about in the past few months seem to be picking up quite a bit of steam. So
we're going to see the old gods collaborating against Xal'atath, maybe? This is interesting because really the old gods and the way they kind of played things out historically is they didn't really collaborate so much. They kind of all controlled their own zones in Azeroth back in the day when it was the Black Empire and everything was going down the old god way. They all kind of had their borders that they somewhat honored, and they just kind of ruled over their own areas. Yasharaj had the biggest one because he was physically the strongest. N'Zoth was always the brain of the operations, right? He was the smartest. But to see them collaborating in a way against Xal'atath, that would be interesting. Because the old gods were supposed to be kind of they were sent out to discover planets, basically. Just sent out into the void, see what kind of planets they could stick to. It would be interesting if the old gods kind of undermined Xal'atath, so Demencius wouldn't show up and destroy the planet, because they wouldn't want it destroyed, right? They were ruling over it. They were gods of the planet. So maybe it was in their own interest to kind of thwart Xal'atath's initial arrival, so Demencius would never show up and destroy the planet, and they could just kind of live as gods on Azeroth forever. Old gods remind me of the 4 Chaos gods from 40k. Yeah, a lot of 40k lore shows up in WoW.
Now, you all must have heard about the
They were spooged into the universe?
11.1.7
Sure.
Legacy of Enator, which involves the erratic
What's up,
questline.
Johnny?
I'll cover that in a different video, but today, I want to talk about the sort of unexpected addition to the Ethereal and Xal'atath lore, which finally answers so many of these questions we've just been speculating in the dark for the past few years. Now, the patch itself is a minor one, so this is part of time walking that we're getting through some content that we had actually visited, but we also get a few travels into the times of the past where we witness crucial events relevant to the World Soul Saga. There are a few more I'll talk about later, but in this video, I want to cover two very important scenarios. When Xal'atath attacked the Old Gods and was imprisoned by them, and also the Ethereals, and our first look into the invasion and destruction of Kadesh, which also heavily hints at something Xal'atath related. And finally, it confirms that those broker guys from the Shadowlands are indeed related to the Ethereals. So let me just preface this by saying that I've actually
Shadowlands Classic. It's coming, guys.
Actually covered this exact scenario with dozens of videos these past 2 years, and if you watch my channel, you might remember some of them. Previously, it was hinted that the old gods had betrayed the Void Lords and were not in fact serving them, and that Xal'atath was sent to get them back in line, and that was now finally presented to us in the actual game. This vision is happening when Yasharaj was still alive, so this is a pre-Titan invasion, probably around the peak of the Black Empire, and Lore Walker Joe tells us he got this stone tablet back in BFA. He finally managed to decipher the story that was written of Xal'atath's
so this is part of some of the Lore Walker stuff. Interesting. Look, the whole thing about the old gods undermining Xal'atath, we've known it's happened. We just never understood quite how. So this is going to be some really cool lore to dive into.
Imprisonment in Ny'alotha.
Your favorite
We don't get
expansion.
actual context of what exactly happened.
Is this what Xal'atath looks like? Really? We're just going to get this low-res blobby boy? I was expecting more.
I think it's pretty self-evident from the dialogue. Xal'atath is invading N'Zoth in particular in her war against the Old Gods, and we see that she's leading a full Void army, just legit pure Void beings, nothing Old God related, which really tells you that she was sent on the behest of Dimensius and the Void as a pure cosmological force. N'Zoth is defending himself, and one of his generals says that these Void guys are nothing compared to our evolved form. However, N'Zoth then calls his brethren for aid and summons the 3 Old Gods that we know of. Keep in mind, the 5th Old God is nowhere.
So was N'Zoth the one who kicked off this whole operation against Xal'atath? That's interesting, though, because it was N'Zoth and Xal'atath working together to get her back out of the dagger the whole time in BFA. So what? Damn. That's unexpected.
To be seen here, which is really a topic for another video, but this
Surprised they
confirms
worked
that if
together.
he did exist, he was gone prior to the Titan invasion, possibly defeated either by Xal'atath or by the other Old Gods. Now, everything is sort of vague, but Yogg-Saron first shows up and says, Xal'atath's betrayal was inevitable. She played her hand too soon, and we will crush her. This confirms the animosity between the Void Lords and Xal'atath and the Old Gods. I really think that theory that the Old Gods were sent by the Void Lords, but they realized that they could just empower themselves instead and control the planet instead of just being tools, was actually right. They might have wanted Xal'atath in on this, but she stayed loyal to Dimensius and turned on them. However, now Khatun is summoned and he shows up in his full 30 polygon classic model glory and says, Xal'atath underestimates us. Her attempts to distract us have failed. Lastly, Y'Shaarj, the most powerful one, shows up and says, Xal'atath, you have betrayed not only the Black Empire, but the very darkness that embraced you. This is the most important line, but we'll get to that in a bit, so let me just talk about this questline real quick. So now the cinematic is happening, the 4 Old Gods are in on this council, kind of resembling the Dreadlord Council back in the day, and Y'Shaarj is obviously the leader. I mean, he's the one that is talking. Xal'atath looks like a complete Void being, like a mini Void Lord, and she gets imprisoned inside the dagger because of this attack. Y'Shaarj tells her, you shall only watch as this world gains untold power without you. You will never lay claim to it. Then she gets transformed, we get some lore that tells us...
This is what's crazy about this. So N'Zoth knew this whole thing. He was part of the main plan of it all. He summoned all these other old gods to help him imprison her in the dagger, and then he's the one who freaking frees her in the end. And the thing is, N'Zoth is the brains. He is the ultimate planner. There's no way he did this without a plan in place. And then we already know that he knew his death was coming. He had foreseen it, right? We basically showed it to him in Dragonflight, which when we went back in time, which was pre-BFA when he dies. So he saw his own death coming. He knew how it was going to happen. Freeing Xal'atath from the dagger must have been part of his plan to survive in some way. That's why I still say till this day, N'Zoth might be dead, but he's not gone forever. He must have had some kind of backup plan with the dagger or something to preserve a piece of himself in it or something. I don't know. But clearly, he was part of the plan to imprison her, and then he was the one who freed her.
That apparently Xal'atath turned on
was
the Old
N'Zoth
Gods
cooking
when
up?
she learned that N'Zoth was building something in Ny'alotha. However, by the end of the cinematic, Xal'atath whispers only to N'Zoth and tells him that they could make a bargain, which actually does happen later down the line in BFA. We know that she guided us to free N'Zoth. N'Zoth released her from the dagger, so apparently they honor this ancient pact in BFA that was made during the Black Empire. However, this is literally some of the craziest lore so far. So first of all, I want to talk about the fact that the Old Gods obviously betrayed the Void Lords. They probably realized they can become just as powerful through Azeroth instead of just being pawns. What they were building in Ny'alotha, we can't really tell, possibly something to awaken Azeroth, but I did talk about this in a previous video, how it is definitely possible that Ny'alotha is actually under Khazalgar because it is known as the Sunken City and there is apparently a sea under
Oh my god, yeah, we've been seeing these squid boys all over the place too, so maybe Ny'alotha is under Khazalgar. He might have a point there.
Sea in Khazalgar that we still haven't seen. This could be the mechanism that we are going to discover soon, this thing that N'Zoth was building. One of the the other possibilities is that just like how the Earthen were impacted by Azeroth and free will, that this is what gave the Old Gods free will, and also this might be why the Old Gods beings have empowered forms that are more powerful than Void beings. It is possible that Azeroth herself might have caused this rebellion, just like how she could have done that against the Titan Forged. However, this is now the most interesting thing. Remember what I just said? When Y'Shaarj was summoned, he said, "Xal'atath, you have betrayed not only the Black Empire, but the very darkness that embrace you." Guys, this is literally the Ethereal theory I've talked about, and I know right now this is a popular theory, but I've talked about this even last year. Y'Shaarj says that the darkness embraced her, implying that she was not a dark being to begin with. The theory I mentioned is that she used to be like an Ethereal queen or one of the rulers that...
This could not be any more Silver Surfer. I mean, what the hell? This is literally the Silver Surfer storyline. Now, the Silver Surfer kind of helped out, oh god, what's his name? The big guy who fucking devours planets in the Marvel Universe. He helps him out because he wanted to save his own people, right? So he kind of enslaved himself so that way his own planet doesn't get devoured. Galactus, yes, thank you. He was of the people whose planet was eventually, all their planets were going to be destroyed. So I don't think Xal'atath, it's not exactly the same because Xal'atath doesn't seem to be playing like a good guy model. She maybe just tried to save herself. So if she was previously an ethereal queen or some kind of high-ranking ethereal, and then the ethereal world gets destroyed, but she gets to survive, well, it seems like she made a bargain for her own life. Like, I will be your Silver Surfer. I'll be your, heralder of your coming. I'll prepare planets for you to devour, Demancius. Just don't kill me with all my other people. Yeah, could be. Kind of also sounds like the Azshara storyline, right? Where Azshara kind of cursed her own people, abandoned them. She was their leader, and yet she kind of wanted to survive, so she made a deal with an old god, and all of her people became fish people out of it.
Betrayed their planets.
Interesting.
Think of the equivalent
Herald
of
your
Phil
coming,
Jaden and
yes.
Archimonde betraying Argus and embracing Fel, or Fel embracing them. For this, Xal'atath was significantly empowered. The evidence for this was the jewelry she wears. It is the exact same that the Ethereals wear on the belt and on the head.
Even the bandages, some people have said, oh yeah, the bandages are a hint of ethereal relations.
The bandages that she added to her legs, as well as the fact that the Ethereals are obviously very familiar with her. They seem to have a long history based on the dialogue. However, now there is new...
You remember the quest with Locust Walker where he kind of chuckles and says, like, Harbinger, is that what she calls herself now? Yes, they... Not only do Ethereals know of Xal'atath, they seem to have a personal relationship with her. It's interesting how whenever you listen to the dialogue, whenever she comes up to an Ethereal. Now, was the relationship related to, oh, they saw her when their planet was destroyed, or was she one of them before their planet was destroyed? These are the questions that we're going to get answers to.
Evidence, as we also get a time travel scenario where we see the destruction of Karash. I'm not going to cover everything, but when Karash was attacked by Demancius, the Ethereals were ruled by a so-called ruling class called the Ethereum. We've just learned about suspected treachery and that they're shocked that a part of the Ethereum had embraced the very void that attacked their planet. So obviously, if Xal'atath was an Ethereal, she would have been the leader of these traitors. For her service and for embracing void, she was given an incredibly powerful form. We've honestly seen this trope time and time again.
Yeah, I just said it.
For example, powerful...
I don't pre-watch this shit, okay? But I know my lore. All right, so yeah, obviously there seems to be some relation here between like how Azshara made a deal and how Xal'atath made a deal.
Azeroth, embracing magics that are outside of Azeroth. Same with Archimonde and Kil'jaeden, regular powerful Eredar that later just turned into demons, so they were completely different beings. Interesting enough, in this questline we finally get a confirmation that those broker guys from the Shadowlands are indeed related to the Ethereals. Venari first interacts with the Ethereals now after being last seen by them during the destruction of Karash, and they say that they now have to work together despite their history, but we don't really know what this history is. Almost certainly against Xal'atath, as the Dark Heart seems to be coming to Karash with the ending of 11.1. Now this in itself isn't a full 100% reveal, but let's just say Xal'atath is 100% related to something with the Ethereals. If she was not one originally, she was definitely there on Karash. However, based on her intelligence and pretty much all the other evidence I mentioned, this does in fact seem to be very likely. All of this finally explains the comments she had back in Legion and BFA about the old gods and their shared history. However, the most interesting thing is this contrast of Xal'atath being a void being, as can be seen in the cinematic, and leading a pure void army, while the old gods have their own evolved forms. Old gods...
If you consider like what Xal'atath looks like as a pure void being, and then what the old gods kind of look like with the tentacles and everything, it's almost like they're a curse of flesh version of the void. Right, we know that the curse of flesh came from the old gods, right? It's something that impacted all of the Titan beings. You got the humans, the gnomes, the dwarves. They all became fleshy after the curse of flesh. Could it be, yeah, that they liked turning everything fleshy? That they were originally these void-esque beings, and now they created all these fleshy beings, all these tentacle boys. Yeah, I think that theory is 100% on par. It makes sense.
Old forms. Old gods almost
old gods make things fleshy.
Realize that Azeroth is the most
Xal'atath's
powerful
more
source
voidy
in the universe, and that through it they can probably become even stronger than their creators. It is, on the other hand, also possible that Azeroth had caused them to rebel. We can see time and time again that Azeroth, as the world soul, gives denizens free will, as seen on multiple occasions with the Titans, so very likely they might have just been a void pawns originally, but Azeroth messed with them, and that could lead to a whole lot of other things. However, even more interesting than this is the Xal'atath.
Ooh. Could that be the case? He just kind of casually said it there, but we already know how like Azeroth influenced, right? All the the Earthen, right? Turned him into Thragar by kind of influencing him to help her in a way. Could it have been that the old gods thought they were corrupting Azeroth this whole time, but in fact it was happening in reverse, and Azeroth was kind of corrupting the old gods to save her, right? So she kind of got into them, influenced them a bit, and basically got them to betray their own, so that way Demancius wouldn't come and Azeroth wouldn't be destroyed. That's an interesting theory I hadn't even thought about. Azeroth's influence on the old gods are the reason that they betrayed Xal'atath? Oh shit. Makes sense.
Obviously, these two were at war, and N'Zoth was building something in Alota, but
yeah,
now
of course,
N'Zoth helped free her, which heavily implies we're going to see him again, or if not N'Zoth, we might finally see Alota and whatever N'Zoth was building that caused Xal'atath to attack him outright. Thank you for watching. Check out the Ashbringer and how it may be retconned by clicking on a screen, and check out my second channel for history by clicking on a screen as well. See you next time.
Yeah, there are some really interesting theories that are coming out. So 11.1.7 is shaping up to be a really heavy lore-intensive patch. I like some of these theories. I do. The reverse corruption from Azeroth, man, that sounds badass. And then the whole N'Zoth-led plan to basically imprison Xal'atath. And we already know N'Zoth is the one who frees Xal'atath in the end. What the hell's that all about? What was he planning? Yeah, L video and L take. Right, Cadence. Yeah, nice video from Doran. Don't listen to Cadence. I'll link this one in the chat.